What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and I want to talk about some things I consider pretty important to the long-term future of iRacing. Consider this a bit of a wish list based off of my experiences as well as the experiences that others have informed me of. Now, as to why I'm doing this now, simply put, because of where iRacing is right now, it's an interesting time. They just had the celebration for the whole 10-year anniversary and everything a month or two ago, and then, we have a couple projects that are in the pipeline, huge projects, day-night transition, AI, new damage model, presumably new tire model version 7, yada yada yada. A lot of things are getting to that point where they should be clearing out, and hopefully the developers will be able to move on to other things and all that. So I feel like now is a good time to discuss these things that honestly aren't quote-unquote sexy features, but they would really help to raise the quality of life and improve the atmosphere of iRacing. And because of that, I don't need to mention those big things that are the quote-unquote sexy features. Let's start off with the biggest thing I'm going to mention in this video. I understand this would be a pretty large project to do because of the number of tracks that would be involved and would need to be updated, but it's time for a pit road overhaul. First of all, it's time to see a commitment cone added. The blend line rule that was added in a couple of builds ago, now that they've got it tweaked, I think that everybody's pretty happy with that, and it's been a positive change. Time to take that same system, put it on the front of the pit road, flip it around the other way, and boom, commitment cones. The next problem would be the one of the ghost cars on pit road. Right now, for those of you guys who don't know or don't understand this, in some cars, it would be literally impossible to leave a pit box on a congested pit road and not damage everyone around you. For example, if the cars were simply made solid as things are right now, every time you go in to make a yellow flag pit stop in an IndyCar at Milwaukee, for example, you're wrecking the car behind you, you're wrecking the car in front of you, and your own car whenever you try and make a pit stop. There's literally about 1.5 feet on the front and back end of the car. It would not be possible. It's not realistic because they're smaller pit boxes that are sized to a different type of vehicle, and that's the problem. Now, barring dynamically being able to size the pit box, which I imagine is an engine limitation, is not even realistic to think about, why not have track layouts which support lower car counts but have larger pit boxes? Or alternatively, maybe we keep the cars ghosted on pit road, but a rule is added where you're only able to drive through, the pit box behind your pit box, and the pit box in front of you. That way we don't have this ridiculous situation where people are driving through all of the cars on pit road, which is just asinine. Next up, and only because it's related, IndyCar versions of the existing ovals. These tracks would have larger pit boxes. They would have the commitment cone added to the correct spot for IndyCar, which would be the entry to turn 3. You have to be on the apron, barring tracks like Indianapolis or Pocono, which are a little bit different. And perhaps most importantly, the apron on the front stretch and the back stretch could be made into a strict no-go slowdown zone. Because yes, while you can technically protest someone for going down to the apron and coming up and causing a wreck because of the sporting code and the way it's written, however, there's a problem. That basically requires you to be wrecked out of the race by some nutcase who decided a good place to put an IndyCar is on the apron. Literally nothing good happens when an IndyCar ends up on the apron. The only time it should be used is strictly for wreck avoidance. I just want to make it clear I'm not even asking for the graphics to be changed because I know that's a non-starter. I know none of that will probably ever happen, but a man can dream, right? Next up, tire limits. This might perhaps be the least sexiest feature around for the vast majority of people, but in the series where it would come into play, it would be a massive game changer. Particularly with what I foresee being a huge focus on endurance racing in the future of iRacing once day and night transitions and theoretically weather years on down the road arrive. This is going to be a big thing that ends up mattering a lot. Rather than as it is now currently having unlimited tires available to put onto the car in a race session, only a certain number of sets per race should be allotted. It's this way in pretty much every racing series around the world. This will put it into pitting on every single caution on ovals, which brings an importance to tire management and saving, regardless of how many cautions there are. It will add drama to long-distance endurance races where double stinting tires could be forced through the rules, similar to how it was handled at Le Mans this last year. I know this subject has come up before because it's been something that several people have requested as well. And I know there's been discussion that it's been a technical challenge to track the tires that are taken off of the car so that way you could theoretically put them back onto the car later on in the race. But I'm just going to say, if that's the hang-up, that needs to not become the hang-up. That's not something that is absolutely needed to make the feature work. That would be an extra thing that would be nice. It would certainly be appreciated, but it would be much better to have tire limits as it is currently, with only being able to put fresh tires on the car a certain number of times than being able to put pre-used tires back onto the car later on in the race. Restart zones. All right, right now rolling starts in iRacing are a mess. The leader can go pretty much whenever the hell they feel like between when the pace car pulls off of the track and when the green flag actually comes out, which is like probably 50 yards before the start-finish line on most tracks. The restart zone as is currently, yes, it exists, but it's so freaking huge that it creates a mess. Narrowing down the restart zones to a more reasonable size will really help clean up the start of the race, as well as restarts, as well as hopefully prevent a lot of carnage. I mean, I'm just going to say this. I've literally have never seen a start in iRacing where the leader waits till the green, the last moment that they should be able to go, and not have that start be an absolute god-awful mess somewhere within the path. And I also want to point out, we don't need to have the graphics that the NASCAR tracks have had added to them recently either. Many of the tracks on the oval side already have the markings on the wall that NASCAR uses, or alternatively, simple signs could be added on nearby trackside fences to indicate where the restart zone is, similar to how IndyCar handles this in the real world. And this is also something that does matter for the road course side of things as well. Anyone who has experienced that awkward rush through the Ford chicanes when you're in the mid-pack at Le Mans knows what I'm talking about. It's just freaking weird. It needs to be stopped. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be addressed. It's silly. I want to go ahead and talk about stuff surrounding setups. Not even setups themselves and all that stuff. This one is a bit multifaceted. First off, there needs to become an in-sim setup repository accessible to anyone when people can share their setups whenever they choose, and they're held there for anyone else to access if they so choose. Currently, this is handled through the forums, but many people don't check the forums, many people don't know this is done, and it certainly doesn't make sense for newer drivers to check the forums when there's already a button that says shared setups. People are looking for setups when they're driving the car and they're in the garage, not when they're cruising the forums, not driving the car. I mean, yes, I understand that like 3/4 of iRacing is the forum experience, but that's not what the goal should be. Secondly, I'd like to see accurate fuel estimates in game. I know this is something that has been made intentionally vague by iRacing by design currently, but with the advent of multiple third-party apps out there that can tell you all of this information precisely and are considered legitimate tools for iRacers, it doesn't make sense to continue doing this. It's simply obfuscation at this point, placing those who don't use such apps at a potential disadvantage by carrying less than optimal fuel loads, or at the very least adding one extra hoop to people before joining the race. All you gotta do in the garage screen, after I've turned some laps, reasonable sample size, tell me how much fuel I'm using per lap. That's all I ask. Along the same lines, I also find that it's pretty silly that the fuel estimate black box doesn't give out numbers that are really even usable at all until it is often too late to do anything about it. I find this particularly silly on a lot of the more modern roadside cars, which have accurate fuel numbers displayed right on their steering wheels in many cases, or alternatively on their dashboard display. So basically, they're already giving you the information, they're just making you have to do the math in your head while you're trying to drive around on track, when in reality, the crew chief would simply handle this and take care of everything. This is not adding skill to the experience, it's just adding more, well hell, it's not even adding anything. It's just like, why is this a thing? I'm gonna go a bit off my rocker here. It's time for reevaluation of the base content. And don't take this as me asking for free stuff, because that is absolutely not a motive here. However, my question is, what is the real purpose of continuing to sell cars like the FW31, the 2011 Ford GT, the Riley Daytona prototype, the GT1 cars, the Jetta, the Kia, and perhaps a few others? What is the purpose of continuing to sell tracks such as Oran Park, VIR, or Motegi? Now, of course, the answer is obviously to make money, but one has to wonder out loud, as populated and popular as these cars, as these tracks are, many of the cars have actually been flat out retired from official duty within iRacing. One has to wonder, would these pieces of content add more to the sim overall as base content for everyone, rather than continue to live out their lives as they currently are? Or in other words, besides the V8 supercar drivers within iRacing, who the hell is buying Oran Park in 2018? Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying those cars or the tracks are bad or anything like that, or I don't like them. That's certainly not the truth. However, I strongly feel that at this stage in their lifespan, they would add far more value to iRacing as a whole as part of the base content rather than continuing to try and sell them. We've seen similar recently with the Radical, a car that always has struggled for participation since the start. Made into base content, all of a sudden it's got a new lease on life and it's actually somewhat reasonably popular again. And this is the one thing I'm going to bring up in terms of content besides what I just talked about though. Along the same lines, it's time to finally finish up New Jersey Motorsports Park and add it to the base content. No, it's not a sexy track. It's not a track that most users will be familiar with. However, just like Okayama, it's a solid circuit for a variety of cars and would seek widespread use as part of the base content pack. Given what is actually left from its current tech track state, it should be a pretty quick track to finish up because it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere and there's just a couple buildings left to be done, and that's pretty much that. Yes, I understand that tracks like Silverstone are infinitely more prestigious and sexy and will provide sales instantly when it's released, but I'd wager the base content is likely just as valuable in the grand scheme of things here. May I remind you, the current new user experience is, hey, here's iRacing, go ahead and drive around this literally 10-year-old version of Lime Rock Park. Actually, it's even older than that. It's not necessarily a good look. Moving on to what I call the Great Reset and a renewed focus on divisions. I'd like to at least see a dialogue opened up with the community on this, understanding that people will always resist change no matter what it is, even if there are potential positives. I've talked about the idea of resetting or restacking the stats previously, and I've done that because I strongly believe that would be a very good idea at this stage in iRacing's life. 10 years of iRacing has led to a lot of huge iRatings, which has essentially incentivized limited participation from these drivers who care about their iRating. Not all iRating drivers do, I should add, because they have a lot to lose whenever they go into a race. The growth of the top end of iRatings has greatly outstripped the growth of strength of fields, and that has led to the problem. Sadly, for a lot of these drivers, they've become prisoner of their iRating. Speaking from experience, the driver who used to be a 3,000 iRating driver back in 2009, 2010 is really not any different than the 5,000 iRating driver now, except for the difference is when the 3,000 iRating driver has a bad race, gets crashed out in turn 1 or whatever, he loses 50 iRating, whereas the 5,000 guy loses like 150 iRating. And while the percentage points may very well be exactly the same, I think the difference between 50 and 150 for these people is a very large difference. Not to mention it's a lot easier to get 50 iRating back than 150 iRating. And it also must be mentioned that a lot of those drivers are the more loyal drivers to iRacing. They are the ones who are the more frequent participants, or would be the more frequent participants, and that's how their iRating ended up being so high, because they enjoy it, they like it, they want to make use of the product, but sadly they're kind of stuck in a position where they're in limbo. And I'll just throw out a different approach. Personally, I would like to do away with showing iRating entirely. I think people get way too wrapped up in a rating that is way too volatile. You have a bad race, it goes in the crapper. You have a good race, it goes up a little bit. You have a bad race, goes in the crapper. It creates a system where people get too wrapped into it because they care about numbers far too much, but that's just gaming in 2018 all over the place. Personally, I would like to see a renewed focus on the divisions, which were originally supposed to matter more than the iRating, because the iRating was never supposed to be this magical skill number it has become nowadays. And I think by putting the focus on a number that is less volatile, doesn't change as often, in the same fashions that iRating can change, it would create an environment where people are more excited and willing to race rather than being paranoid about a 3 or 4, or, God help you, a 5-digit iRating number. Next thing, safety rating and licenses. It's time to get serious once again. iRacing's prime differentiator in the sim racing world is the racing. The product is the racing. I'm just going to say this, in the position that I'm in here doing these videos and things like that and being around the community in and around, the number of comments I've seen over the years from respectable drivers who have been pushed away by the diminishing driving standards, myself included, is frankly depressing. The other sims out there on the market are looking to improve their driving standards by developing systems to improve player behavior. Meanwhile, iRacing has already had these tools and has had a massive advantage, but seems to be set to regress back to the norm. Then you have to ask, well, if the quality of the racing itself is the same and features and all that stuff is going to largely boil down to personal preference, what does iRacing really have to set itself apart and demand the premium price tag? It would no longer be a premium product demanding a premium price. While the saying goes you can't fix stupid, you can't make stupid smart by educating them, which is what the safety rating system should be doing. What it used to be able to do, what it is intended to be able to do, whether or not people choose to realize it. My point is, iRacing is no longer some underground racing sim no one outside of the pre-existing sim racing community has heard of, and it must reflect that to be fully a premium product that is intended and positioned to be. Simply put, we were able to get away with the system as it is now back in 2010, 2011, even before then, because the people that were coming in already probably had prior experience, rather than nowadays where that well has largely dried up, and now it's people who are outside the sim racing world and are getting immersed into something different and they're learning, and they need to be trained as to what they're supposed to be doing. The solution to the poor behavior on track wasn't the incident limit that no one asked for. It was tougher limits to weed out those who make an effort and are capable. Nut jobs and orange HPDs will be protested and hopefully removed, as that's why you have the whole protest system in the first place. We may have needed fast track back in 2010 because so few drivers at that point had made an A-class license, which left those series dead at the time. But now literally everyone who basically just checks the boxes gets an A-class license, regardless of if they actually deserve it or not. It's simply an obsolete system that undercuts precisely the once undeniable X factor iRacing had versus the competition, which was the quality of racing, and it's honestly devalued the product. It's a very serious issue that iRacing needs to address properly, rather than saying, but we got an incident limit and we've looked at the incident count, so the racing is better, guys. It's cleaner. Yeah, job done, right? No, not even close. Last thing, I promise, late season participation needs to be addressed. This has always been an issue, that big drop off from the start of the season to the end of the season. Start of the season, every series is populated, everybody's having a good time, happy fun times. 8 weeks in on forward, it's an absolute ghost town and everybody's looking for strength of field races. Why has this been an issue? Participation credits were designed to alleviate the issue and to encourage people to do a full season participation, but clearly that has not fully addressed the issue. I would like to really see an effort to understand what is happening. Why does this exist and what can be done to fix this? Because it does definitely diminish iRacing, because, well, if you can't get a race and the product is the racing, then 2 plus 2 generally equals 4. I would really like to see a service-wide survey sent out to try and get some data and to understand why this is. Why aren't people racing towards the end of the season? Is it just because the seasons are too long? Are they burned out? Is it a scheduling thing? Is it because of the content? Is it because everybody renews their subscription around the new build time, and as soon as their 1 month subscription expires, there's half the members already gone? What is it? Why does this happen? What can be done to fix it? That way, well, people can get into races and do more racing, and hopefully with a better quality of racing provided. Happy fun times. Everybody's a winner because the product is better. Alrighty, so that's 9 things iRacing needs to get around to doing in the next 10 years. Why 9 things, by the way? Because I've been an iRacing member for 9 years, so I thought, hey, we're talking anniversaries. Yeah. But anyways, I've ranted, I've raved. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.